Okay, so my course is called The Historical Narratives of Winchester, and this will be the third time that this course has run. And I usually run it, and I think it's set to run again in January, February time of the next academic year. And it will be situated, I believe, at Winchester School of Art, which is a convenient location for a Winchester-based course. My personal interest in Winchester is my PhD studies. So I am currently at Southampton as well, doing a thesis on a particular abbey that used to be central to Winchester. So before the giant cathedral that you can see in the picture was in the centre of Winchester, there used to be two smaller monastic churches. They were both in this space. So the one sort of on where the Norman Cathedral is now was called the Old Minster, and then there was one just to the left of it, sort of in the grassy space, or it might be on your right, depending. So on the grassy space, there was the New Minster, which is the abbey that my thesis is about. Halfway through its life, my abbey was moved after the Norman conquest, particularly in the sort of the early sort of the early 12th century to outside the North Gate, and became Hyde Abbey. So you may have heard of various bits in Winchester to do with there's a Hyde Street, and St Bartholomew's Church, which is still there, was on the land of Hyde Abbey, and it is famously known, the Abbey, Newminster, and then Hyde was famously known, possibly not so well known now, but as being the burial location of King Alfred the Great. So that's one of the characters that we will look at, one of the historical figures that we will look at in the course. The session that I've chosen to do today, to give you a little bit of a taste of the course, is actually about the Winchester round table. So let's see if I can just yeah, so there it is, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So my course really, as part of my research, I've had to look at the different historical narratives and the stories surrounding the city of Winchester, which is often known to be the historical capital of England. There's a little bit of controversy over the word capital. It is probably one of the main cities, but some people would argue that there was no capital. But it was definitely a very, very important city in the late Anglo-Saxon period, and then into even the Norman period. It loses its importance in sort of around the 12th, 13th centuries. But my course again will explore that a little bit. So it's about the importance of Winchester, and one of the kind of the main things people think of when they think of Winchester is the Winchester Round Table. So for those of you that may not have been to Winchester, or do not know what I'm talking about, if you go to Winchester today, you can go up to the top of the town, and sort of at the very top of the high street on your left, you can find the remains of a medieval castle. And the main remains that are there now, because the site has been very altered, and there were sort of later kind of barracks and things built in the sort of 19th century, and possibly 18th as well. But the remaining Great Hall is a medieval hall that was the castle that it was situated in was originally built by the Normans, by William the Conqueror, and then the Great Hall that's there today, which is pictured, is thought to be constructed, and the marble kind of arches added by King Henry III in the 13th century. And if you go to this hall, on the wall there is a giant, as you can see here, a giant large wooden circle, and this is known as the Winchester Round Table. So this taster is just gonna to share some thoughts on the table, and look at the way that an object of this type could can tell us things about history, and maybe tell us things that we think we know and things that we don't actually know. So the way that secrets can be revealed through these objects. So when we look at the round table, what we can see is a giant sort of circular wooden object. It's 5.5 meters in diameter, and it's approximately 18 feet, and it's extremely heavy. I think it's about 2 tons. It's mounted on the wall of the hall, and historically it's been on the wall of the hall for a very long time. So it actually used to be mounted on the other side, on the other wall of the hall, but they moved it to this one when they built, they did certain gates on the other side of the hall, and so they moved it to this side. But it's probably been mounted on the wall of the hall not long after its initial creation. So it's been on the wall more time than anywhere else. We're not really very sure when it was put on the wall, but it's been, historical accounts have placed it there for a while. It's quite bright, it's quite vibrant. It has been repainted in more of the modern era, but it has this kind of segments. It's painted in segments, 24 segments, and it also has the throne on it, kind of a throne with a little canopy, and it has a king sat there who is described as King Arthur, and he's holding an orb and a sword, famously likely to be Excalibur, and it's got a red and white rose in the center of it. So I guess if we think about this and some of the things that people tend to be interested in when we think about the Winchester Round Table, is the legend of King Arthur and the legendary king. So because this is called the Round Table, and it actually says on it, this king is King Arthur, and also the inscription in the middle of it reads, "This is the Round Table of King Arthur with 24 of his named knights." This would make us think at first look, perhaps, that this is King Arthur's, historic round table. And in terms of who King Arthur was, he is known as a legendary king of Britain, and accounts suggest that he may have been around, possibly, in the 5th and 6th centuries AD, and he was written about extensively, and all the tales of King Arthur and the stories of Merlin and Camelot and the Round Table, they are all from the 12th century. So this is perhaps what we might think of when we look at the Round Table. So key things that sort of key elements that we might think of. But are they true? Is this what the table is actually telling us? So for starters, one of the questions I get asked when we do this session is the table actually a table? And can we know this from investigation of the table? And I think, yes, we can know this, and there has been extensive research done on the table, and there is an excellent book on King Arthur's Round Table that was written by Martin Biddle, and you could get it sort of from the shop there or online, and it's got a really very in-depth look at it, and it's really fascinating. So first of all, yes, the table was actually a table. It was made of 12 kind of spokes and originally had 12 legs. So it was a table. Where the table was positioned, whether it was positioned in the Great Hall, whether it was taken outside for a particular event, how it was put, where it was put, we don't know. It was likely made from the construction of the table, from the examinations they'd done of the back of it, by someone who constructed water wheels. So it's similar design to sort of medieval water wheels. And the dating of the table, so there's various different means of dating, but they've done something called dendrochronology, which is where they look at the different tree rings, and they look at other objects of different ages. So they take an object where the wooden object where they know it's from a certain period, and then they compare the tree rings to things they're trying to date. So they think that the oak from the table was from kind of the second half of the 13th century, maybe into the 14th century. And there are accounts that the table was hung on the wall of the Great Hall, probably the other wall from what it's on now, from the 14th century. So it was only probably about 100 years before it was hung on the wall. Other studies have been done of what the painting on the table can tell us. So the painting is also really interesting. It is possible that there was painting on the table before the current painting. So when it was first made, it is possible it was painted, but it would have had to be in a very similar pattern to the current design. So if it was originally painted, it was likely to be painted with segments, a similar segment design, and likely with a rose in the middle. This is a theory because there are similar kind of carved elements on the ceiling of the Great Hall that kind of mirror this pattern. However, the current design, and there's nothing underneath the current design that says otherwise, that it was originally painted any differently or that it had a different image on it. But the current design is very much likely painted in the 16th century under King Henry VIII. And this is likely to be in preparation for a visit from the European monarch Charles V, who was also Charles I of Spain. So he was Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, and Charles I of Spain, and he was Catherine of Aragon's nephew, for those of you that like some Tudor history. It was restored, repainted in a slightly more brutal way in 1789, but they think from the kind of image scans they've done of it, they think that the image, that the repainting was basically a touching up of what was already there. But the face is slightly different of the king, but not much at all. It's essentially the same image. So so this is the painting sort of tells a different story to the making of the table. The table is older than the current painting. I often get asked as well who our 24 knights are on the table, and there is literally every single knight that is ever mentioned in any Arthurian legend, but most Arthurian legends don't mention 24 knights. So this is every single knight that could be found kind of smushed into one object, and they include some of the main ones that you may have heard of. I've got a very convenient postcard that tells all the names, and I will pass that around in the session. But people like Sir Galahad's on there, Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawain, Sir Percival, so Mordred, and then less known ones, such as Sir Billow Berris, or Sir Allymore, Sir Pellinor, Sir Bors. So any kind of anyone who's ever mentioned has been sort of shoved on there. So why does the table look like it does? And there's sort of a number of reasons for that, really. So the king on the table is named as King Arthur, but realistically, the portrait of the king, from the kind of the seated position, the what he's wearing, his sort of state robes, the chain around his neck, the crown, the beard, the awning that he's sat under, is very similar to contemporary images of Henry VIII. Henry's brother who died was also called Arthur, so there's a possible connection there that he was sort of trying to fondly honour his dead brother as well. But essentially, this might be called King Arthur, but realistically, this is an allusion to Henry's own power. And it is thought that he's making a statement about his power and connections, and he often uses references to historic kings, such as King Arthur. Kings notable for fighting off maybe European invasion, for being warrior kings, to assert his own dominance, to assert his own kind of ancestral right to rule, and an ancestral right to rule without European interference, most kind of significantly. And the 24 knights on the table, this has also been thought, and we will go into some more detail in the session, to reflect the 24 elders that appear in the book of Revelation of the Bible. And in the biblical scenes of this ilk, there would be an image with God or Jesus in the middle, which suggests that in this instance, if we're thinking about this in biblical terms, it's almost giving the central figure here a divine role. And we, you may know that Henry VIII went on to form the Church of England and to become head of the Church of England. It's also at a time when kings were being anointed in their accessions, and this anointing was seen to be a very divine element, that they rule with the right, God-given right. And if any of you watched the coronation of King Charles, there were things there that they were doing that was very almost medieval, with the anointing and the kind of the God-given right of kings. And then in the very middle of this, some of you might recognise, is a gigantic Tudor rose. So this is a very not subtle sign of the symbol of the Tudor dynasty. So in terms of kind of wrapping this up a little bit, and I hope it has been of interest to you. So we have reference to a legendary king from the 6th century, and if you are more interested in King Arthur, we do go into more depth on King Arthur in the session, so we look a bit more at who he was, or possibly wasn't, and whether he was real. So we've got a legendary king from the 6th century, a table made in the 13th century that's become an iconic symbol of Winchester, and a table that then is painted in the 16th century by a different king who's using it for a different reason. So and all of this revolves around monarchy. So again, situating Winchester as the historic heart of rule in England, right the way from kind of, you know, late Anglo-Saxon period. So kind of key general conclusions about this, because I don't want to leave you guessing, but the Winchester Round Table is likely to have been created for a round table tournament, which was an event during the Middle Ages that involved jousting, feasting, and dancing in imitation of King Arthur's legendary court. The person who probably made the table, because of the dating of it, is probably Edward I of England. And Edward is known to have been an Arthurian enthusiast, and we know that he hosted a round table event in 1290, and this was possibly to mark the betrothal of one of his daughters. And this may have been, there's no evidence to certify this, but this may have been the occasion for the creation of the Winchester Round Table. It's likely that the presence of a round table in Winchester led to the city being linked with King Arthur and Camelot by the 15th century, and even in accounts by this later period, the Winchester is often named as Camelot in ancient, in the kind of later accounts of the story. I think more recently there was that more recently in Winchester College even they found one of these accounts of King Arthur, one of these kind of the romance tales of this period. And then the current paintwork was likely done by order of King Henry VIII of England, who in the 16th century used the table to connect his power and status to that of the legendary King Arthur. So created to honour a semi-mythical king, used as a sign of Edward's power, reused as a sign of Henry VIII's power, and still present in Winchester, giving this kind of historic connection and symbolism to the city. So finally, I would like to just say a little bit about the course that I'll be offering. So week 1 and week 6 are kind of, week 1 is a little bit of a crash course through the history of Winchester to give us a little bit of context, so what's sort of going on, and we kind of go from maybe the 8th, I do go a little bit earlier, maybe 6th century, right through to kind of the Tudor period. Week 2 we look at St Swithin and the miracles of St Swithin and the what happened to St Swithin, why he was sainted, why he became a symbol, and then what eventually happened in the dissolution to his tomb. Week 3 we look at Alfred the Great and his presence in Winchester, his importance generally. Week 4 we look at a battle between the giants Colbrand and Guy of Warwick, which not many people know about, but it was a very, very famous battle in the by the the late medieval period. And then week 5 is the Winchester Round Table, and we'll look more at Arthur and Camelot and Winchester and the connections between all of those aspects. Generally, we're thinking about the way that people in Winchester told their own stories, portrayed their own history, and I mean, a lot of it I think we want to be true, and it just isn't. But it's interesting to see how things have been used and things have been portrayed, and how these narratives were developed, and they form, the cultural kind of part of Winchester and how it's thought of today.